Hello and welcome to Science Fiction Fanatic, the podcast that helps you find new, emerging, and undiscovered science fiction podcast content. I'm Greg, the host and curator of Science Fiction Fanatic. If you are a science fiction fanatic, click that subscribe button now. This is a podcast feature episode. If you like the creator, check out the episode notes for links to subscribe. Today's episode is from Soundtrack Your Life. Soundtrack Your Life is a podcast about soundtracks and our personal connections to them. This episode is for the movie Ex-Machina from 2014. It's a fun one. All right, let's get this show started.
Begin.
Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
Hi, I'm Ryan Pack, and this is Soundtrack Your Life. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and you can follow us on Instagram at SoundtrackCast and on Twitter at Soundtrack_your. You can also support the podcast by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/SoundtrackCast or through Anchor. Our guest today is award-winning composer David Rosen. He is also the host of the Piecing It Together podcast, and they come out with episodes every week. So welcome, David.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, today we are going to talk about the 2014 Alex Garland film Ex-Machina.
Oh, yeah.
So, David, why are we talking about Ex-Machina today?
Oh, there's so many scores that we could have picked from, just recent ones, classics, anything in between. And this score, though, is one from the last decade that I feel has just been super influential on me and my sound. And so I just thought it would be the one to pick to sit and talk about for a while. I think that it does so many interesting things, and I love Alex Garland's work, and I love these composers' work, Ben Salisbury and Geoff Barrow, and just there's so much interesting stuff happening on this score, and so I thought it would be a good one to talk about.
Yeah, and for listeners, if you find the name Geoff Barrow to be familiar, he's also the principal songwriter Portishead, right?
Right, absolutely.
So, did you know of Salisbury and Barrow's work before this film, or is this kind of how you got into them?
This is definitely how I got into them. And as much as I have really loved everything from Portishead that I've ever heard, I also have never dug into their albums. So just as a name, I didn't realize at first that he was from Portishead. I only found that out later after looking up, what other stuff either of these two were involved in. But definitely as far as films are concerned, the first time I heard of them was during this particular score, and then continuing to hear more of their work, especially with Alex Garland's, follow-up feature, Annihilation, and then series Devs.
Yeah, they seem to be his go-to composers now.
Yeah. And it's definitely, they have a style for sure. I mean, that's one thing. And I guess there's two different schools of thought, whether or not it's better to be, not that they're not well-rounded or anything. They certainly have a range to what they do. But whether you're somebody who does like a lot of different stuff or someone who you just know like, oh, they're scoring it, you're going to get something creepy and dark, and it's going to really set a mood, so to speak. Right.
Yeah, I think I read an interview with them on this website called The Quiet Us, and I think they talk about John Carpenter quite a bit, and I think you can see that in their music a little bit with the creepiness.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, talk about inspirations. Like John Carpenter is such a huge inspiration for me as well. And like, yeah, and, I know when talking about film score, again, two, schools of thought. I mean, some people want more melodic, more, traditional film score type music. Some people are okay with more electronic type stuff. And I certainly come from a background of electronic music composition. And so when I hear electronic music in film scores, going back to John Carpenter or other kinds of more recent artists that do that, to me, I find that just hugely inspiring. And I think that there's just so many different kinds of things you could get out of that. But especially in, films that are meant to leave you unsettled, there's just such a wide range you could get into when you're dealing with synth-based scores like this, versus when you're doing more traditional scores in these kinds of genres, you're going to get a lot of dissonant strings, and that's kind of where you go. Versus with a bunch of synths, you can do some really wild stuff.
Yeah, so I read that Ben Salisbury also comes from like a kind of more traditional score background. He did a lot of like David Attenborough documentaries, and so at least in 2012, when they first started working together, he would want to throw in some, kind of melodic strings, and Geoff Barrow would basically shoot him down every time.
Yeah, that's you wonder almost like, you have to assume Alex Garland knows what he's getting himself into, and probably there's a lot of conversations involved, but you almost wonder like, you hire this guy and you're like, okay, so let's see what you got for my film. And you think maybe it's going to be something more, traditional. And then all of a sudden you get these creepy, weird synth, just grinding synth lines and arpeggiations and all that, and it just you're like, oh wow, okay, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, and I feel like with this film, especially kind of the setting that it's in, it kind of works better to have less, less is more.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of isolated
Absolutely.
in this compound, and if you have a 60-person orchestra playing something, it's going to completely take you out of the atmosphere that Alex Garland's trying to create.
Absolutely. And, not to like jump around or anything like that, but one of my favorite things about the score, this is a great score to listen to on its own. I mean, it's just really beautiful music, but in the way that it's used within the film, I love how it kind of blends into the ambient sound of the compound, and like the buzzing and whirring of electronics in the walls and stuff like that. And, it's kind of where the sound design ends and the score begins sometimes is very blurred. And I think that just, really, it's disorienting in a good way for a film like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I first started listening to the music, because I knew who Geoff Barrow was, I think I was expecting a little bit more. But, I mean, it's very effective in how it's used, and I think that's because he is a master at his craft, and he understands atmosphere. Like, I think Portishead is very good at being kind of unsettling, but also kind of pretty at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And that's what this is, unsettling but pretty at the same time.
By looking into the soundtrack, this was the first time I was aware that he had moved into scoring films. And, with him and, Trent Reznor and a lot of these other musicians that kind of come from more of a, I guess, rock background.
Yeah.
I was wondering if, this was kind of a trend that had come up recently over the past, 15 years or so, or if it was just I'm more aware of who's composing soundtracks now, and that's why it feels like there's a lot more. But I believe in this interview, Barrow said that, or Ben Salisbury said that, directors are looking more to musician from just background than your traditional Hans Zimmer bombast.
Yeah. That is a really good question, because, at one one end, we maybe just aren't aware of where some of these names came from. I mean, of course, Danny Elfman was, from the world of rock music before getting into composing. So, I mean, there's certainly examples, but at the same time, it does seem like it's happening a lot now with Trent Reznor, with his name's escaping me right now, but from Radiohead,
Johnny Greenwood.
Johnny Greenwood. I mean, we're seeing a lot more of this lately. There was a great indie earlier this year, Come True. The director who records music under the name Pilot Priest also did the music for the film. And so, I mean, these, traditionally, bands like artists or whatever are now scoring a lot of films, and I think it makes sense from the musician point of view too, especially with the changing music business. And it's not exactly easy to make a living as an artist anymore, as far as like just putting albums out and them making money or anything like that. So I think it makes sense for artists to try to get into film scoring.
Yeah, I think One Otrix Point Never is another big name.
Oh yeah.
He's done a lot of work with the Sadvi brothers.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those two scores that they did with the Safdies.
Oh, Safdies, yeah. I always get that last name messed up. Sorry. So when he's talking about how, a lot of these, non-traditional composers have been coming up, it's because, and he points to Drive and Trent Reznor specifically. He says they point to this growing unease. And I think directors are becoming more comfortable with, not having just like a traditional John Williams score. Not to dismiss John Williams completely. They make sure that they're not here to draw a line in the sand or anything. But
sure,
this is Ben Salisbury's quote. You have a lot of these traditional scores. They're very boring. You can have an orchestra of 1,000. You can have fucking cannons firing. It just doesn't have the impact that it used to.
Yeah.
And then stripping stuff away, doing something on a kazoo and a ukulele is way more arresting than 100 people sighing away on violins.
Yeah, that's definitely a good quote there. And it's funny because me being a more synth-based score composer, I'm certainly not against a more traditional score. I mean, my favorite score, we actually have a top 10 scores of 2021 episode coming out, and my favorite score of 2021 was Harry Gregson Williams' The Last Duel. And I mean, that's as just old school epic score as you can get. And there's certainly a place for it, like in a movie like that. But there's just nothing wrong with this kind of score either. And so, I think some people maybe need to let go a little bit of tradition when it comes to scoring a film, and accept that, sometimes these kind of scores really have a place, especially in films that feel, new and feel exciting and fresh.
Yeah, I think films that are dealing with technology, including The Social Network, which I think is probably the most well-known Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score.
Sure.
I feel like those films don't have a place for more traditional sounding scores because the subject matter is non-traditional.
Yeah, absolutely. That film just would not have worked with a more traditional classical score. It would have almost made the whole thing just feel like Oscar bait, probably, and rather than being the like kind of raw and cutting film that it is.
Yeah, an orchestra would be fine if it was like a true biopic, but since The Social Network is dealing with like these multiple lawsuits that are going on and kind of telling his story through these lawsuits, it's a non-traditional way of telling his story, and therefore it required a non-traditional score to kind of accompany that.
Yeah. And by the way, that is also one of my favorite scores of the last couple decades. I mean, who doesn't love that score?
Yeah, and it's also one of those scores where, like, if you're really familiar with Trent Reznor, it makes sense. But if you only know, like, the Nine Inch Nails radio songs, you're like, oh, this is not exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's weird that I keep on kind of falling into this trap of finding out, this guy that I like in the traditional like rock world is scoring a film, and then I listen to the score and I go, oh, this is a little bit different than what I was expecting. And I don't know why I keep on like tricking myself or falling into that trap, like, oh, Geoff Barrow worked on this, and then I'll listen to it and be like, oh, this doesn't really sound like Portishead.
Right.
And I don't know why I keep on falling into that trap, because I should know better. Like, Johnny Greenwood scores don't necessarily sound like Radiohead songs.
Totally. Yeah. And yeah, that is something that we should just, we should know better. But I think it just, I think it's just part of life to kind of put things into boxes and not even realize that we're doing it sometimes.
Yeah. Like if I listen to the Phantom Thread score, I'm not like, oh, this sounds like a guy from Radiohead.
Yeah.
And obviously they're clearly talented people, and that's why they're able to make this transition. But for some reason, I just always like, oh, cool. Like, I blame Explosions in the Sky, because I feel like their Friday Night Light soundtrack just sounds like a bunch of Explosions in the Sky songs.
Fair. Yeah, that's definitely fair.
Like, I think they're maybe the one crossover where they just basically did what they were already doing.
Mm-hmm.
But still not traditional.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, would you consider this an ambient score? I think that's how it's described in a lot of articles.
I would say so, even though it certainly builds to things at times, but I would say the majority of it is certainly more atmospheric and ambient. I know, like the first piece within it, the Turing test, I mean, you don't even really realize that music's happening for the first like minute or two before like things really start to build up. And so yeah, things definitely start off much more ambient, and it kind of grows and falls throughout the entire score. And so we get a lot of very ambient moments.
And so out of the soundtracks that we were discussing about covering for this episode, you picked this one because it has a huge impact on some of the work you've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. When I have been kind of like building this career for myself, composing music for film, and also my albums that I put out under my name, David Rosen. Definitely this score has been just a really huge influence on me. Certainly with my film work, I actually just last year released a soundtrack album for a film called The Dissection Table, and that's a film that's not available yet, but the director gave me the go-ahead to put it out as a soundtrack for now. And that score, I had a lot of this in my head when I was working on it. One moment in the film in particular, and I mean, this film's already, over 10 years old. Hopefully we're not spoiling anything for anyone, but when a certain character kind of peels her face down, and it's just like a really kind of shocking reveal that you kind of knew was coming, but at the same time it's just kind of horrifying the way it happens, the way that those synths just like swirl, and just lots of like really dissonant synth stuff all kind of grinding together. That was like a big influence on the kind of direction I was going for with the score for The Dissection Table, and kind of blending just how beautiful synth-based scores can be with how horrifying they could be. I definitely wanted it to be a little of both of those things at the same time, which makes for a lot of musical stuff happening, but it really kind of shows just how much you can do with that.
Yeah, that scene is definitely one of the standout scenes in the film. And you're right, I kind of knew it was coming, but at the same time, to actually see it on screen and with that music, it's just anxiety inducing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of my favorite things about this score is you really like kind of feel it in your gut. It's like it just, you feel it like almost like a sick feeling in your stomach when you hear the score. And I think that fits so beautifully with the themes of the movie, because with the idea of this AI based robot basically, and trying to have it prove that it's so lifelike that you can't tell the difference, kind of gets you into that uncanny valley territory, which uncanny valley, kind of creates a feeling of like that sickness in the pit of your stomach, because it's something that's just not real, but it just feels so real and human like, but it's just, you just know it's not. And it just, your wires kind of cross inside, and it just makes you just not feel right. And I feel like the score does that too. And so that's like a really powerful thing for a score to be able to do. And there's no better film for that to happen than a film like Ex-Machina, where that's like literally the point of the movie.
Right. There's a big music video director named Chris Cunningham. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but he's done videos from Aphex Twin to Madonna. He's done a lot of videos. He's also done a couple Portishead videos, which is kind of interesting since Geoff Barrow has worked with him, and now Alex Garland. But I kind of get the same sort of feeling from watching his videos to watching Ex-Machina, where the effects are just so realistic but also creepy at the same time. I think Cunningham actually helped out with AI with some of the digital effects for that film. Nice. So I feel like there's kind of a parallel there.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did a video for Bjork.
Okay.
I think it's For All Is Full of Love. And I think it has I'm not sure if I'm getting the videos mixed up, but I think it has a similar sort of feel as this film.
Okay. Yeah. Well, those Aphex Twin videos are really cool. So I'm sure a lot of this influence kind of comes from that same kind of a place.
Yeah, where he's got like robots falling in love and.
Oh yeah. One thing I found interesting that I didn't realize until just a couple days ago, and I don't really know too much about this aspect of the score, but the track Bunsen Burner, which is actually from Cuts, which I don't know anything about. Did you find anything about Cuts?
I did not.
Yeah, because it seems to be almost like the basis for the more guitar-based melodic kind of parts of the score. Almost like they took that existing piece and built that idea into some of the other segments of the score. And I don't know, that's just kind of interesting. It's like a whole separate credit, I guess, that can be given to the direction that the score went. I'm wondering if maybe it was almost like a temp track or something that Alex Garland was already interested in, and so they were able to kind of synthesize that into the overall score.
Oh, that's interesting. I believe Johnny Greenwood did something similar with There Will Be Blood, like as a previously written piece of music that he had debuted at some sort of one-off orchestral thing, and then he kind of used that to kind of build the score around. And I think that's why There Will Be Blood couldn't be nominated for the Oscar for Best Original Score, because it wasn't technically original.
Right. Yeah, there was some existing stuff there, and yeah, there's all kinds of weird rules like that when it comes to the Oscars.
So it's possible that Barrow and Salisbury just had it laying around, and
sure. Yeah.
Because they've been working together since, I believe, 2012.
Yeah, it looks like they, because they also did Free Fire, and I believe they did some other TV work as well, aside from Alex Garland's show Devs. But I'm not sure exactly how many other projects they did together.
Yeah, they did something called Drock in 2010. And I know that. And I believe that's why I found this interview from them in 2012.
Okay. Oh yeah, they did Hannah, the TV series Hannah. That was really good too. But yeah, I mean, as far as the Alex Garland ones, I mean, Annihilation that end scene of Annihilation, the music in that is so insane. That's some of the most creative, weird electronic score that I've heard in years.
I haven't seen Annihilation yet, but I want to see it now that I know that Alex Garland was behind it.
Oh, yeah. Also happens to be the first episode of Piecing It Together, by the way.
I'll have to also check that out.
Yeah.
I've been trying to catch up on episodes of your show, and it's been a little intimidating because I have a film background. I have a film degree, and just some of these puzzle pieces that I'm hearing people pull from their memory bank. I'm like, oh man, I've got some huge gaps in like my film history knowledge.
Oh, nobody feels that way more than me. Trust me. Whenever my guests bring up movies that I haven't seen, and I'm like, oh yeah, aren't I supposed to be the host of this show? But maybe we'll get you on Piecing It Together one of these days.
I gotta get my film muscle memory back up to speed.
Yeah, get a little marathon going first, and then we'll get you on.
But kind of stealing a little bit from your show, I definitely get like a Frankenstein sort of feel from Ex Machina. Obviously, like a futuristic Frankenstein.
Sure, absolutely. Definitely, Frankenstein is part of the DNA of this project of creating this thing, making this life, and what that means, and the responsibility that comes along with it. Yeah, absolutely. Also, I feel like personally, one thing that I love so much is it's not a direct connection, but the loose connections between this and the Alien films, that specifically Ridley Scott's prequels, which came after, but then also with his original first Alien movie, but just dealing with those synthetic characters, the androids, and especially when we get to later on, I would say Ex Machina actually was the inspiration in a way for those Alien prequels, because of just how angry the David android character is with his creator, and that I think a lot of that is paralleled so well here with Ex Machina. The two of them really deal with that issue very well.
Right. And I remember I don't know the exact line, but it's when Nathan and Caleb are talking. I think it's after the first or second meeting with Ava, and Caleb mentioned something about playing God, and then Nathan kind of twists it into this compliment, and Caleb's like, no, that's not what I said.
Yeah, by the way, Oscar Isaac, just amazing. He's so good in this, and such a monster, just an awful person, but just incredible to watch.
Yeah, awful, but kind of charismatic at the same time. Like the most dangerous kind of awful that you can be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He sells some of his points particularly well, like when he tells Caleb, like, so what? You were chosen. Isn't that better than being lucky?
Yep. I mean, it's hard to argue with him at certain aspects of what he's doing and what he's saying, but at the same time, it's just like this freaking guy, But yeah, it really makes you wonder what is going on in certain research facilities with some of these just insanely wealthy and insanely they're able to like do anything they want without any kind of oversight whatsoever. It's creepy for sure.
Right. And then the intense paranoia and the almost hilarious alcoholism in the film.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Oh, so you had a party last night? What are you talking about?
Yeah, he just stares at him. He's like, what? What party?
The score is kind of sparse at times, so like when Caleb can't sleep and he turns on the TV and the TV is actually just security footage, it kind of adds to that creepiness of what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always so important to know, as a composer, when to let things be silent. And this film definitely understands that and doesn't overdo it. As big as a score can get at times, when things are allowed to get like really dark and really dirty, like I know the track Hacking Cutting from the score, when there's just some like really just filthy like ARP synth stuff going on, and then of course when like some of the guitar elements start to come in, and so it gets bigger at times, and then especially when like some of those synths are creating dissonance between the two different synth sounds. It definitely gives it the opportunity to grow, but it really knows how to use the silence as well, which is so important. And like we were talking earlier about, this being like a closed off compound, you don't really want it to be overtaken by sound. You want to feel the silence of that and like the claustrophobia of it.
So, David, what are some of the other soundtracks apart from the Ex-Machina soundtrack that you find inspiring for yourself?
Definitely those Safdie brother scores that you mentioned earlier, Good Time and Uncut Gems. Both of those are definitely something that I really love from recent times. Going a little bit further back, I've always been a big Clint Mansell fan. His stuff that he's done with Darren Aronofsky and also Moon. Those are some scores that just really, really have spoken to me and to what I want to kind of accomplish when I'm working on music for something. And, we already talked about Trent Reznor, but he's been a huge inspiration in all my music. Even though it's funny because my music, I kind of split my time between these albums of instrumental music that kind of falls somewhere between electronica and new age and alternative rock, and they're just kind of just a whole blend of things. And then my film scoring work is, it's still a film score. It's not rock songs or anything like that. But my biggest inspirations do tend to come from like the instrumental portions of a lot of alternative rock songs, like stuff like The Cure and Depeche Mode and stuff like that. Parts where the music is allowed to grow into like big instrumental sections. I kind of take a lot of cues from stuff like that.
Yeah, I can definitely hear that in your music.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was listening to the Dissection Table kind of, I guess, in tandem with listening to the Ex-Machina soundtrack, because, you had kind of mentioned how it's very influential in your work. And I wouldn't say, and you're not, I'm not saying that, I can hear it all over your work, but I can definitely tell that you've heard the Ex-Machina soundtrack.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's there, I think. And yeah, I feel like when when I'm working on things, I definitely do try to, I kind of wear my influences on my sleeve, I think.
Just a kind of funny connection between One O Tricks Point Never and Geoff Barrow is on the newest album from The Weeknd that's executive produced by One O Tricks Point Never. And then when The Weeknd released his first solo album, there was a huge controversy that one of his singles was ripping off of Portishead's Machine Gun.
Okay.
And I believe The Weeknd was like, oh, it's, kind of like a light interpolation of it. And Geoff Barrow basically was like, I have a letter of you asking for permission for the sample.
That's funny. I really like The Weeknd. I haven't listened to any of his albums yet, but like all the songs I've heard are really good. I got to listen to that new album. I hear it's so freaking awesome.
Yeah, I haven't heard it yet. I've heard great things about it, and I heard the One O Tricks Point Never influence is definitely just all over the... I mean, he's the executive producer, and you're not going to get that credit by just, plinking a couple keys and calling it a day.
Yeah. No, that their collaboration there, that really makes me want to check that album out soon.
Yeah, I'm more excited about that than when I heard that he was collaborating with Daft Punk, 5 or 6 years ago.
That's certainly a more up my my speed when it comes to what in popular music, what would excite me.
Yeah, he did a great job on that James Blake album.
Now, that I haven't heard either.
It wasn't the most recent one; it was the last one. But
okay,
yeah, I'm glad that things are going well for him.
Yeah,
it's great that it's happening on both of the film score and popular music side for him.
Sure.
Are you working on any other film scores coming up?
So I am going to be working on a film probably in about a month or two, actually, where we've been going back and forth, the director and myself, about the direction of it while they're getting the first edit done. So I'm really excited to dig into that. I haven't worked on anything this year yet. Well, I guess it's still January. I work on a lot of stuff. That seems like a long time, 1 month. But hey, I'm excited to get to work on that, though. I'll actually be splitting composing duties with another composer, actually a friend of mine. So that's going to be interesting. I've never done that before. Splitting work on one score with somebody. So that's going to be an interesting experience. And then I have a friend who I already have started working on music. It was going to originally be a short film, and they're expanding it to a feature. And so that, I don't know how long it's going to take till that gets to me, but that is on the horizon as well. So definitely have those two, on the horizon coming up. And in the meantime, just working on more music for my next album. I'm actually working on 3 albums at the same time right now, which is ridiculous. But yeah, it's, during the pandemic, I started a lot of new tracks. And so I've got so much to just kind of like go back to and start like finishing and turning into full songs. And so they're kind of shaping up to be, 2 of them are like kind of different themes. So they'll be like very differently themed albums. But then the third thing is going to be a compilation of some music from various short films I've worked on over the years. So that'll be more of like just a compilation type thing. But I'm excited because, it's not always, not everybody checks out short films, and it's awesome to work on them. It's always super rewarding. But, it'll be cool to get that music out in a way that more people will check it out.
Oh, very cool. So when you're composing music for a short film or a feature, do you get how much of the film do they give you to work to, start working?
Ideally, all of it, and it's already at a like locked cut. It doesn't always work out that way, but whenever possible, I do request that because, once you really get into like the nitty gritty of it and things are like perfectly timed to the moments in the film and everything, it's like if then they're going to go and change things around on you and you got to recontextualize it all, it just kind of makes things a little bit of a mess. So ideally it's all there when I actually sit down to start working. But yeah, a little of everything though. Sometimes I'll even just start on ideas beforehand, just based off of either clips or maybe the script or just talking with the director. So it really just depends. But it's best when you have the whole film you could sit down with and watch and get an idea of exactly what's going to be happening in this story.
Yeah, I'm always curious, like when a composer is working with someone that they haven't worked with before, like how that conversation starts. Like, do you send kind of demos of stuff you've done? Like, what do they kind of ask for when they're trying to find a composer for their project?
Yeah, it's always interesting because it's always completely different, just based on the person and the way that they approach things. And I've had just like every possible way you could think of be the way that it goes down, whether it's, start scoring the film and then let's talk, which is not ideal, to let me hear a bunch of clips from things you've worked on before that are like what my film is going to be, to, I heard your work and it sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. So just let's go ahead. Let's get started. So, that's always nice. But it just depends on the person.
Yeah, I think I was listening to an interview on, I think it was a film score podcast where the person that was scoring a film kind of created a bunch of tracks that they thought the director would like. And then the director was like, no, I want something. And he gave like a bunch of like different examples, and then he had to kind of like completely shift gears.
Yeah. I mean, it happens. Luckily, in the many, many things I've worked on, it's only happened a couple times for me where, what I was working on just was not fitting exactly what they thought it should be. And, I've been able to kind of, get a new start going and figure something out and make it work. And so that's awesome, because it's great to be able to collaborate with somebody and it work out and for them to be happy. And 90% of the time that I've worked on something, it's worked out that way.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about your experience kind of doing a collaboration score. Obviously this is on a different scale, but the Harry Potter films have 4 different composers.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that. That's crazy.
And, just for all these people to kind of try to connect and make their own thing while also realizing that John Williams scored the first one and they need to incorporate some of those elements. It just seems like such a interesting creative conundrum to have.
It is. Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah, without like going too deep into it, since we haven't gotten started on it yet, I do know that the myself and the other composer are going to be scoring 2 different parts of the timeline within the film. He's going to be scoring flashback sequences, and I'm scoring current sequences within the story of the film. So how that's going to play back and forth with one another, I remains to be seen, but we're going to figure it out. And I'm sure there'll be ways we can like tie together what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, that sounds super fascinating to me.
Yeah, and he's more of a classical piano-based composer, and I'm obviously more of a synth-based composer, and that's why the director wanted us both to work on this, because of her vision for how that will interplay with one another. And so yeah, I'm excited about it.
It sounds like there's enough structure where it's not going to be like, there's not going to be too much like stepping on each other's toes, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a feeling out period.
Yes, absolutely.
That's very exciting. Yeah, and these are the stories that I love for this podcast, to kind of figure out like how this stuff happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm just excited to actually get started on it, and start having those discussions and figuring out how to essentially make 2 different things work together.
You might have to get some strings in there.
Yeah, most likely. we will see what works and what doesn't, I guess. I never really know until I sit down. Sometimes I'll know that I'm going to be getting a that first cut from a director, like, on Monday or whatever, and I'll already have ideas in my head of, what I'm going to do once I get it. And then I sit down, I import it into my software, I load up some sounds, start plinking away on the keyboard, and nope, I'm doing something else. Like everything I thought, I like this better. So, you just never know.
So another quote about scoring from Geoff Barrow and Ben Salisbury. It's a great interview. I should send it to you. I'll send it over email later.
Nice.
They were talking about how they feel like scoring is good for them because it kind of creates structure, like deadlines. And then, so they're talking about the difference between making a soundtrack and an album. And Geoff Barrow said, I found it easier. I think it's different when you're actually working on a picture. The idea of working to a time frame and edits and emotional changes kind of creates the structure for them. Instead of just, trying to create like a Portishead album where it's kind of more open for, your ideas of what you can do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, that's like going back to the Ex-Machina score where we started out talking about like in any score really, but Ex-Machina does it really well, is knowing where to leave things silent and to just rest in that atmosphere, and it's just so important to keep that in mind when scoring something. And so, yeah, you need the confines of the film to kind of dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, and then to be totally thrown for a loop when orchestral maneuvers in the dark place.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, like I love the juxtaposition of that where there's this choreographed dance scene, but it is like the creepiest thing.
That is such a great moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, I think you get hints of like what's going to happen in the movie. And, usually when someone compares themselves to playing God, they're probably going to die. But, with Kyoko, the, I guess the other android, the previous model android, you kind of know something's off from the beginning, but then that kind of, just breaks it all open for how everything's going to go from there.
Yeah.
And instead of Geoff Barrow and Ben Salisbury having to create something to kind of break that tension, they use a different song. It's like one of the few songs that are not from the actual score.
Yeah, it's a little more upbeat, shall we say.
And that somehow makes it even like more terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this guy can be kind of so far gone in his little world he's created that he could just be like having fun on a Saturday night like that.
Yeah, and it just kind of makes his whole conversation with Caleb earlier in their film about why he created a gender for these androids even like more disgusting.
Yep, absolutely. There's a darkness throughout this that isn't necessarily shown, but you get glimpses of it, but you can imagine so much more of it. And yeah,
and that's like the moment where like the curtain is completely like pulled back and you're just like terrified about connecting all the dots.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I was looking through what Geoff Barrow has worked on in addition to these soundtracks, because the last Portishead album was in 2008, so it's been a while since they've done anything. And I forgot that he did a remix for the Meow the Jewels album. Or do you remember that one?
I've never actually heard it. I remember when it came out though.
It is pretty unlistenable.
I'm sure they had fun making it.
Yeah,
though.
I listened to it for like a week because the whole concept behind it was hilarious, and they got so many people to do remixes for that album. Like so many legitimate people made cat remixes for Run the Jewels, but it is as unlistenable as you would expect.
I would make a cat remix.
And I would probably listen to it.
It would be fun. I actually have an album of songs like folk rock that go into kind of indie rock songs about my dogs and cats that it's been on the back burner to release for like years now, but one of these days I'm going to finish it and put it out. It's just like a fun little comedy novelty album.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a totally different side of my music.
So outside of the electronic synth adjacent instruments, what other instruments do you play?
I play some guitar, but mainly keyboard though. The majority, like I would say, like 80 to 90% of anything happening in one of my pieces of music is keyboard based, synth, and various kinds of software. But I do play guitar on my tracks as well.
Well, very cool, David. Very excited for these projects coming out.
Yeah, I am too. I absolutely am too.
You can check out David's music on all streaming platforms. right?
Yep. Yeah, it's on all of them under my name, David Rosen, and Piecing It Together is everywhere under Piecing It Together. I put them on everything, and you could find my website is bydavidrosen.com, which kind of links to everything that I'm a part of, whether it's music or podcasting or film scoring or album producing or any of that kind of stuff. I do a lot of other stuff as well, so it's all there on that website.
Yeah, I'm trying to not tell people to listen to it on Spotify.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to remember not to say it myself. It sucks though, because, just like the Oscar Isaac character in Ex-Machina, I mean, all these companies are terrible, and so Spotify's no good, but neither are the others that are the alternatives. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do at this point?
And I don't want to do the whole, like, they're all bad, so don't care. But it's also like, well, you're kind of picking the, the prettiest pig in the pen.
Yeah, exactly. Worst case scenario, go to Bandcamp and buy my actual CDs. They're available. But that's if you still have a CD player.
Yeah. Support David by actually paying for his music.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And people can check out Piecing It Together.
Yeah, everywhere there are podcasts, and our website is piecingpod.com, and I am very active on all the social medias, so get in touch if you like what we do over there. I'm at piecingpod on Twitter.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, and hopefully I will get the courage to show up on your podcast sometime.
I would love to have you sometime, definitely, and I'll send you a clip once we finally get something going with this new film I'm working on.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.
Thanks again for listening to Science Fiction Fanatic by Indie Drop-In Network. If you would like to nominate a podcast for feature, just send me a tweet at Indie Drop-In. Indie Drop-In Network has many other shows that you might enjoy. You can check them out at indiedropin.com. All right, see you next time.